what exactly does the Bible mean when it says to fear the Lord? Should we shudder? Should we hide? What does it mean? Today, I'm going to show you biblically that God requires us to have a healthy fear of the Lord. So let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to Reason for Truth. I'm your host, Stephen Gear. Follow you to Reason for Truth. Truth comes first, reasons come last, but we're always and constantly learning. So we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well. So let's start by differentiating between the fear of God and the fear of and the belief between the authentic believing Christian and the non-believer. Well, because they're very different things. According to Michael Hausman, founder and CEO of GotQuestions.org, he said, for the unbeliever, the fear of God is the fear of judgment of God and eternal death, which is eternal separation from God, as laid out in Luke 12:5 and Hebrews 10:31. Now, on the contrary, for the believing authentic Christian, which is many in this audience, not all, but many, the fear of God is something much different. See, for them, the believer, their fear equates to a reverence of God. Hebrews 12:28-29 is a good description of that, saying, therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, and thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with what? Reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. That's speaking really of the fear of the God. Verse 29 goes on to say, he says, our God is a consuming fire, right? This means that God's lengthy warning to those who are tempted to abandon the faith. That's what it's speaking to there. Chapter 2:1 to all the way to chapter 12:29 covers this with a vivid description of God's judgment. Deuteronomy 4:24 all the ways as well just talks about that at the end the Lord's going to judge his people. He talks about that in chapter 10, verse 28, and there lies the rub. That's the real issue. God's going to judge his people. Some people say, well, God's just nice. He's not really going to judge that harshly. Reverence and awe are exactly what the fear of God means for the believing authentic Christian. And this is the motivating factor for us to surrender to the creator of the universe. Some people just don't want that. They want to be their own God and do their own thing. You can do that, but remember, you choose to send yourself to heaven or hell depending on which you choose on earth. God doesn't send you there, you do. I do, right? I choose, you choose. Proverbs 1:7 declares that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So until we understand who God is and develop really a reverent fear of him, we cannot have true wisdom. True wisdom comes only from understanding who God is and what that means for him to be holy, his just and righteous. Deuteronomy 10:12 in chapter 20 or 20-21 tells us regarding circumcision of the heart. Just covered this in Sunday school card. What does that mean, class? Circumcision of the heart. Well, what we're talking about there is you could have physical circumcision, but to accept Jesus as Lord and Savior, certainly in the New Testament, but to surrender to God is a circumcision of the heart. Think what a circumcision meant. It's building that covenant. It's acknowledgement. Well, that's a confession to accept God and to say, hey, I'm his. He's to eternity. That's a spiritual circumcision of the heart. Verse 12 says, and now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you but to fear the Lord your God and walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your what? Heart, and with all your soul. Verses 20-21, as we said before, starting in verse 20, you shall fear the Lord your God, you shall serve him and hold fast to him, and by his name you shall swear. He is your praise. He is your God, who has done for you these great things and terrifying things that your eyes have seen. In other words, we've seen God in action before, and it can be frightening to see. God's very loving. He's very patient. He is judge. He's truth. He's judgment. He's mercy. He's all those things. Love. And anyways, he's all of those things equal. Now, the bottom line is that the fear of the Lord is the basis for our walking in his ways according to his word. That's his Bible, serving him and, yes, loving him. Now, some will try to defend the fear of God for believers strictly to respecting him. While respect is definitely included in the concept of fearing the Lord, there's more to it than that. You can't just sit here and say it just means respect. A biblical fear of God also includes how much God hates sin, or understanding of how much God hates sin, and the fearing his judgment is a big part of that for our sin. Even as a believer, Hebrews 12:5-11 describes God's discipline to the believer. While it is done in love, Hebrews 12:6, remember, God only disciplines the neighbor boy, his own, not the neighbor boy, as Dr. Geis used to say in class. It's still a fearful thing. So when we were children, our fear of discipline from our parents no doubt prevented some very evil actions on our part. So the same should be true for our relationship with God. That's you and me. You see, we should fear that's God's discipline, and therefore seek to live our life in a way that pleases him. Listen, this is a simple thing, and in conclusion, let me wrap up. Believers are not to be scared of God. No, that's silly. We have no reason to be scared of him. We have his promise that nothing can separate us from his love, Romans 8:38-39. We have his promise that he will never leave or forsake us, Hebrews 13:5. Fearing God means having a reverence for him that greatly impacts the way that we live, the way we think, the way we speak, the way we act. And the fear of God is respecting him, obeying him, submitting to his discipline, and yes, worshiping and loving him in awe. And that's what it means to fear the Lord according to God through his word, the Bible. And that's all I got to say. As you can see, these things, a lot of people will probably have, this would be good discussion around the dinner table. Let it happen with your kids, with your parents, your grandparents, with your neighbors, coworkers. Great subject. So thank you for tuning in. Appreciate that. I've been out of studio for a while. Feels good to be back here doing some new in-studio versus out-of-studio recording. So thank you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one or any other ones. God blessings to you. We'll see you over. Make sure you subscribe. We'll see you at the next episode. You know what I say? I'm your host, Stephen Garofalo, and this is what? Your Reason for Truth for today.